Did you think this week would be calm for the Commanders? You're completely wrong. The last 24 hours have been a roller coaster of decisions shaking the foundations of this team. While Adam Peters keeps playing poker with one of our stars, a former draft pick is shining where he could never do it here. And the organization just made decisions that will define the immediate future. If you're a Washington fan, you need to stay until the end because what's happening is going to change everything you thought you knew about this season. Like it now and subscribe, because this information is exclusive and you won't find it anywhere else. Look, I'm going to be completely honest with you. What happened with Dominique Hampton was inevitable, but the way it unfolded is just devastating for the player. This kid was a 5th-round pick last year, a safety who was key to leading the Washington Huskies to the national championship game in 2023. Adam Peters saw something in him and decided to take a chance. Let's properly put into context who Hampton was before joining the Commanders. At the University of Washington, this guy was an absolute machine in the back end. During his senior season, he recorded 60 tackles, 4 interceptions, and 8 passes defended. But the most impressive thing was not his stats, but his leadership. Hampton was the quarterback of that Huskies defense that led the team to the college football playoff national championship game against Michigan when Peter selected him in the 5th round with the pick 161 overall. There were legitimate expectations. The Commanders had seen film of a player who could cover slot receivers, support against the run, and also had the leadership mindset we wanted in our locker room. On paper, it made all the sense in the world, but here's the reality no one wants to admit. From the moment Hampton stepped into the Commanders' facilities, it was clear he didn't have what it took to compete in the NFL as a safety. The speed of the game was completely different. In college, Hampton could read plays because he knew the tendencies of Pac-12 quarterbacks. In the NFL, he was constantly a step behind. During his first minicamp, reporters covering the team started noticing Hampton had difficulties in coverage. It wasn't just that he occasionally missed assignments, it was that he seemed overwhelmed by the complexity of the defensive system. Veteran wide receivers were consistently beating him in scrimmages, and we were talking about non-contact practices. The organization, instead of immediately giving up, made a smart decision. They moved him to linebacker, thinking his athletic abilities might translate better to that position. Hampton had the physical attributes. 6'1", 205 pounds, with 4.4 speed in the 40-yard dash. In theory, he could become that modern linebacker who can cover tight ends and running backs while also supporting against the run. I think it was a correct decision on paper, but the execution was what failed. During his entire rookie season, Hampton was practically invisible. He played only 6 special team snaps in a single game throughout the entire season. 6 snaps in 17 weeks. Now I ask you, how is a player supposed to develop with so few opportunities? The fundamental problem was that Hampton wasn't showing the necessary progress in practice to earn more playing time. Sources within the team told me that during the entire 2024 season, Hampton struggled with the mental aspect of the game. As a linebacker, he needed to be the quarterback of the defense in certain situations, especially when Bobby Wagner wasn't on the field. But Hampton couldn't make those calls correctly consistently. This season's training camp was no different. Hampton continued being a ghost, someone who was there but never really stood out. Coaches gave him opportunities in scrimmages against the second-team offense, but even there he looked lost. In a specific drill covering running backs, Hampton allowed 3 consecutive receptions of more than 15 yards. That in a training camp where the defense is supposed to have the advantage, and then came the moment of truth. The preseason game against the Patriots. That game we all know was a total catastrophe for the Commanders. We lost 20-10. The offense looked completely disconnected, and the defense allowed a rookie quarterback to dominate us in the second quarter. But for Hampton, it was more than just a bad night. It was the end of his experiment in Washington. In his 23 defensive snaps against New England, Hampton committed fundamental errors that you simply can't allow at the NFL level. In one specific play in the third quarter, Hampton completely misread his zone coverage, allowing a 22-yard reception in a 3rd and long situation. The most devastating thing was in the fourth quarter when Hampton had a clear opportunity to make a tackle for loss on an inside zone run. The Patriots running back completely evaded him with a simple cut turning what should have been a loss of 3 yards into a gain of 8. Those are the plays that define whether a player has a future in the NFL or not. His performance was so bad, so below expectations, that Adam Peters didn't even need to think twice. The next day, Hampton was on waivers, and here's what impacted me the most. When the news was announced, not a single teammate expressed surprise publicly. That tells you everything you need to know about how Hampton was perceived within the full-ish locker room. I'm telling you this. Peters has no feelings when it comes to making decisions. It doesn't matter if you were his pick, if you've been with the team for years, or if you come from free agency. If you don't perform, you're out. And that's exactly what happened to Hampton. This decision also sends a clear message to the rest of the roster. No one is safe if they don't produce. But let me explain the financial implications too. As a 5th-round pick, Hampton had a 4-year rookie contract worth approximately $4.2 million with only $265,000 guaranteed. The Commanders had already paid most of that guaranteed money, so cutting him now cost them practically nothing from a salary cap perspective. But you know what's the saddest thing about all this? Hampton had talent. The problem is that he never found his place in the system. In college, he could rely on his instincts and athleticism. In the NFL, he needed fast mental processing and refined technique. Without those tools, athletic talent isn't enough. Now he's on waivers, waiting for another team to give him an opportunity that probably won't come. The reality is that when a player is cut after only 1 season and 5 games, especially by the same GM who selected him, that raises red flags for the rest of the league. Other teams are going to wonder what the Commanders saw in practice that convinced them to give up so quickly. My prediction is that Hampton will probably end up on a practice squad of some team if he's lucky. But his window to establish himself as an active roster player is closing fast. In the modern NFL, you have maybe 2 years to prove you deserve to be on the field. Hampton had his chance and didn't seize it. Now, let's talk about something that pains my soul as a Commanders fan. Jamin Davis is playing like a star with the New York Jets. Yes, the same Jamin Davis we declared as the biggest draft bust of the Rivera era. Let me remind you of the whole story because it's important to understand the entire context. In 2021, when most of us were screaming that we needed to take Christian Darrisaw, Ron Rivera decided that Jamin Davis was the future of our defense. An athletic, explosive linebacker with all the physical tools to dominate in the NFL. Davis came from Kentucky, where he had a sensational season in 2020. In just 10 games, he recorded 102 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, and 2 interceptions. But what really impressed scouts was his versatility. At Kentucky, Davis could rush the passer from different angles, cover tight ends in the seam, and also be effective against the run. At the Combine, Davis put up absurd numbers. He ran the 40 yards in 4.47 seconds at 234 pounds. His vertical jump was 40.5 inches. His broad jump was 11 feet and 3 inches. From a pure athletic perspective, Davis had everything you want in a modern linebacker. Rivera and his staff were convinced they had struck gold in the first round. Jack Del Rio, who was our defensive coordinator at that time, saw in Davis the kind of playmaker who could transform our defense from mediocre to elite. In his mind, Davis was going to be our Luke Kuechly, our Fred Warner. But here's the problem. Rivera never knew how to use Davis. From the first day of his NFL career, they put him in the middle as a middle linebacker, trying to get him to read. Running angles he clearly couldn't decipher. Davis had mostly played as an outside linebacker in college, where he could use his speed and athleticism to make plays from different positions. In Washington, they forced him to become something he wasn't. As a middle linebacker, Davis had to be the brain of the defense, making calls and adjustments pre-snap. He had to identify offensive formations, communicate coverages to the defensive backs, and also be the primary run defender between the tackles. Those responsibilities weren't playing to his strengths. During his rookie season, Davis consistently struggled with the mental aspect of the game. In a particular sequence against the Cowboys that still pains me to remember, Davis took false steps on 3 consecutive plays, allowing runs of 12, 8, and 15 yards. Ezekiel Elliott was cooking him simply because Davis couldn't read the keys correctly. He didn't have the proper support around him either. Our defensive line in 2021 was terrible, which meant Davis constantly faced blockers without any block. Offensive linemen were arriving at the second level cleanly, and Davis had to beat blocks in space instead of making clean. Tackles, that wasn't his strength. Frankly, Rivera's defensive system was a total disaster. There was no consistency in the schemes, no clear identity, and players seemed consistently confused about their assignments. Davis was just the most visible symbol of those systemic problems. His second season was slightly better, but only because expectations had drastically lowered. Davis recorded 104 tackles, which sounded impressive until you realized that many of those tackles came after the running backs had already gained 5 to 7 yards. He wasn't being disruptive. He was just cleaning up plays. When Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. arrived, they decided to give him one more chance. They recognized that Rivera had misused Davis and wanted to see if they could unlock his real potential. They moved him to the edge, thinking his physical attributes could work better there as a pass rusher and run defender from the outside. In theory, it made perfect sense. Davis had the speed to beat tackles around the edge and the strength to set the edge against running plays. During the first days of training camp under Quinn, Davis looked different. There was a confidence in his game we hadn't seen before, but it was already too late. Davis had lost confidence after 3 years of struggles, and the adaptations weren't fast enough. Additionally, Quinn had brought his own group of pass rushers who adapted more quickly to the system. Davis found himself competing not only against expectations, but against players who already understood what Quinn wanted. After only 5 games and 86 defensive snaps in the 2024 season, they cut him. In those 5 games, Davis had recorded 8 tackles and 0 sacks. He hadn't shown the explosive production Quinn needed to see to justify keeping him on the roster. The final moment came after our game against the Eagles in Week 5. Davis had played 23 defensive snaps and had missed 2 critical tackles that led directly to Philadelphia touchdowns. Quinn made the decision that same night. Davis had to go! And now I ask you, how is it possible that a player we couldn't develop in 3 years and 5 games is dominating with the Jets? The answer lies in the coaching and scheme fit. Aaron Glenn. Put him in the position of weak side linebacker in his 4-3 scheme, and suddenly Davis is playing like the player we always thought he could be. As a weak side linebacker, Davis has the freedom to use his instincts and athleticism without the responsibility of being the brain of the defense. In Glenn's system, Davis can flow to the ball naturally instead of having to process complex assignments. He can use his speed to chase plays from behind, and he can drop into coverage in obvious passing situations without having to make complicated calls. The difference is that Glenn is maximizing Davis's strengths while minimizing his weaknesses. Rivera and Del Rio tried to make Davis something he wasn't. Quinn didn't have enough time to develop the relationship, but Glenn immediately understood how to use Davis effectively. In the preseason game against Green Bay, Davis was the highest rated player on the whole team according to Pro Football Focus with a rating of 83.3. 1 sack, 1 run stop, 0 missed tackles. And the most impressive thing, he wasn't targeted even once in coverage. But let's go into the specific plays. His sack came in a 3rd and long situation where Davis used a perfect speed rush, beat the left tackle around the edge, and collapsed the pocket exactly when Jordan Love was trying to step up. That's the type of play Davis should have been making for us. His run stop was equally impressive. Green Bay was running inside zone to the weak side, and Davis read the play perfectly, shed the block from the tight end, and made the tackle in the backfield for a 2-yard loss. That combination of reading, technique, and finishing is what we desperately needed in Washington. But what impacted me most was his performance in coverage. The Packers never targeted him, which means Aaron Glenn trusts that Davis can handle. His responsibilities in pass coverage. That was supposedly one of his biggest weaknesses here. I think this reflects 3 fundamental things. First, that Rivera really didn't know how to maximize talent. Second, that sometimes a player just needs the right environment to flourish. And third, that Davis never lost his talent. He just needed coaching that played to his strengths. Do the Commanders miss Davis? Of course not. We have Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu, 2 second-team All-Pros, who have completely transformed our defense. Wagner brings the veteran leadership and football IQ that Davis could never develop. Louvu brings that versatility of being able to play multiple positions effectively. Plus, our linebacker room now has real depth. Cody Barton can step in when we need, and we even have young guys like Trey Walker who are showing promise. Athletically, we don't need Davis to be competitive, but if Davis becomes a star with the Jets, it's going to be another stain on Ron Rivera's failed legacy. It's going to be another example of how Rivera misevaluated talent and misdeveloped players who had the potential to be significant contributors. The NFL changes quickly, and for the first time in his career, Jamin Davis has fortune on his side. Glenn is keeping things simple, playing to his strengths, and not asking him to do anything he can't handle. If Rivera had done the same from day one, Davis would still be with us and probably be a cornerstone of our defense. What bothers me is that Davis had all the physical tools to be successful here. His 40 time, his explosiveness, his length, it was all there. What was missing was the coaching and scheme that maximized those tools. Glenn found it and we lost the potential. Playmaker due to coaching negligence. And now we come to the news that has all Commanders fans on edge, the contractual situation of Terry McLaurin. And let me tell you something, this is much more complicated than any of us imagined. McLaurin, our undisputed WR1, is officially in a holding situation. He's on the field, he's participating in practices, but everyone knows this is just a strategy to avoid the daily $50,000 fines he would have to pay if he skipped camp completely. To fully understand this situation, we need to review McLaurin's current contract. He signed a 3-year extension for $71 million in June 2022, which made him the highest paid wide receiver in the franchise's history at that time. The deal included $53.25 million guaranteed and a $28 million signing bonus. But here's the problem. That contract no longer reflects the current market for elite wide receivers. Since McLaurin signed his extension, we've seen contracts like Tyreek Hill's 4 years, $120 million. Davante Adams, 5 years, $141.25 million. And more recently, A.J. Brown's, 3 years, $96 million. McLaurin is currently scheduled to earn $17.35 million in 2025, $19.45 million in 2026, and $20.65 million in 2027. On paper, those numbers sound significant, but when you compare them to what other wide receivers of his caliber are earning, McLaurin is being underpaid by about $5 to $8 million per year. According to the most recent reports, the negotiations between McLaurin and Adam Peters are at a total stalemate. Peters has a price in mind and won't pay what McLaurin's representatives are asking. And here's what worries me. This relationship is more fractured than we initially thought. Sources close to the team have told me that conversations between Peters and McLaurin's agent, Tory Dandy, have been tense from the beginning. Peters represents a completely different philosophy compared to Martin Mayhew, who negotiated McLaurin's original extension. Mayhew was willing to pay market value to retain talent. Peters is more conservative and believes in building through the draft rather than paying premium prices for veterans. McLaurin and his representation are asking for something in the range of $26 to $28 million per year, which would put him in the same tier as receivers like Tyreek Hill, Davante Adams, and Cooper Kupp. They are arguing that McLaurin has outperformed his current contract and deserves to be compensated as one of the top 5 receivers in the league. Peters, on the other hand, is offering something closer to $22 to $23 million per year. His argument is that McLaurin has never had a season of over 1,400 receiving yards and never been selected as a first-team All-Pro. From Peters' perspective, McLaurin is a very good receiver, but not a generational talent. Deserving generational money. The timing of this negotiation couldn't be worse. McLaurin is entering the last year of his current deal with limited leverage. If he doesn't sign an extension before the start of the season, he'll have to play the entire 2025 season with the contractual uncertainty hanging over his head. Linnell Willingham from 106.7. The Fan has highlighted something crucial that many are overlooking. Cut down day will be pivotal in this whole saga. Cut down day is August 27th, when all teams have to reduce their rosters from 90 to 53 players. If there's no new contract by that time, McLaurin could start the season on a PUP list due to his supposed ankle injury. But here's the reality. Most people within the organization believe that ankle injury is more strategy than legitimate medical concern. And here's where things get really interesting from a financial perspective. If McLaurin is on PUP at the start of the season, he will be collecting his checks during the first month without playing. According to NFL rules, a player on PUP reserve must stay on it for a minimum of 6 weeks, meaning he would miss the first 6 games of the season. Once removed from PUP, there's a 21-day window to activate him to the 53-man roster, essentially covering 3 more games. We're talking about up to 7 games where Terry McLaurin could be collecting $850,000 per game without even stepping on the field. But here's the reality. McLaurin is not going to sit out completely and lose all that money. The $850,000 per game checks are too significant to sacrifice completely. My prediction is that if he goes to PUP, he'll be activated after the first 4 weeks to minimize the financial impact while also sending a message to Peters. I'm telling you this. Peters needs to find a solution quickly. We don't know exactly what's happening behind the scenes, but it's clear there is tension. McLaurin probably feels his position got strengthened after the pathetic performances of the other wide receivers in the game against the Patriots. In that game, the other receivers on our depth chart were absolutely terrible. Dyami Brown had 2 critical drops, including one on 3rd and 8 that would have extended an important drive. Jahan Dotson, who is supposed to be our WR2, only had 2 receptions for 18 yards and looked completely out of sync with Marcus Mariota. The reality is that without McLaurin, our receiving core looks mediocre at best. Luke McCaffrey is still raw as a rookie. Olamide Zaccheaus is a solid role player, but not a legitimate WR2. And our tight ends, while improved with Zach Ertz, are not game changers in the passing game. McLaurin knows he is irreplaceable in our offense, and he is using that leverage in the negotiations. His argument is simple. Pay me what I'm worth or see what the offense looks like without me. Peters hasn't blinked either. He has a plan, he has a budget, and he's not deviating from it easily. Peters built his reputation in Baltimore and San Francisco as someone who doesn't overpay for players, even when under pressure. His philosophy is that no individual player is above the team's success. From Peters' perspective, paying McLaurin $26 to $28 million per year would significantly limit the team's financial flexibility. We would have less money to re-sign other key players like Brian Robinson Jr., who will be eligible for an extension after this season, or to address other needs in free agency. This is a high-stakes poker game, and both sides are betting big. McLaurin is betting that Peters won't want to start the season without his best playmaker. Peters is betting that McLaurin won't want to sacrifice millions of dollars and a potential playoff run to make a point. The pressure is also coming from the fans and the media. Everyone knows McLaurin has been the most consistent playmaker in this franchise over the past 5 years. Since arriving as a 3rd-round pick in 2019, he has been our most reliable offensive weapon through multiple coaching changes, multiple quarterbacks, and multiple schemes. His numbers speak for themselves. 364 receptions for 5,530 yards and 31 touchdowns in 6 seasons. He has had 3 consecutive seasons with over 1,000 receiving yards, which is rare for wide receivers in this franchise. He has been our leading receiver in 4 of the last 5 seasons. But Peters also has legitimate concerns about setting precedent. If he pays McLaurin top of market money now, what message does that send to other players who might demand extensions in the future? Brian Robinson Jr., Jonathan Allen, Darren Payne, all those players are going to point to the McLaurin deal when their time comes to negotiate. The easiest way to resolve all this is simple. Peters needs to find middle ground somewhere between $23 to $25 million per year. That would be enough to make McLaurin one of the top 8 to 10 paid receivers in the league without completely breaking the salary cap structure Peters is trying to maintain. How he's going to achieve that with the tension building is something nobody knows, but it needs to happen. The alternative, starting the season with McLaurin on PUP or unhappy, would be devastating to our playoff aspirations. And as long as McLaurin is on the field with his teammates in week 1 against the Giants, nobody will care what it costs to get there. Fans only want to see McLaurin making plays and helping this team compete for a playoff spot. But if this drags on beyond cutdown day, we could be looking at a very ugly situation for the start of the season. McLaurin on PUP would mean Jaden Daniels, our rookie quarterback, would have to develop chemistry with receivers who clearly aren't ready to carry a significant load. The clock is ticking, and Peters needs to make a decision soon. Pay McLaurin what he's worth or risk starting the season without your best offensive weapon. In my personal opinion, the choice should be obvious. Look, Commanders fans, these three stories show exactly where we are as an organization. We have a general manager in Peters who isn't afraid to make tough decisions, but who's also playing high-stakes games with our star players. The situation with Hampton shows us that this organization will no longer tolerate mediocrity. If you don't produce, it doesn't matter when you were drafted or how much potential you have on paper, you're out. That mentality might be brutal for some players, but it sends a clear message to the rest of the roster. Everyone has to earn their spot every single day. The story of Jamin Davis teaches us a painful lesson about the importance of coaching and scheme fit. We have to wonder how many other players we have lost due to poor development or misuse. Davis is thriving with the Jets because Aaron Glenn found a way to maximize his strengths while minimizing his weaknesses. Rivera never figured that out, and the McLaurin saga is probably the most critical situation facing this franchise right now. McLaurin isn't just our best receiver, he's our most consistent offensive weapon and one of the few true leaders in the locker room. Losing him, even temporarily, would be catastrophic for our championship aspirations. But I also understand Peters' perspective. He's trying to build sustainable success, not just win now at the expense of future flexibility. Finding that balance between paying your stars and maintaining roster depth is one of the most difficult aspects of the job. Do you think Peters is handling the McLaurin situation well, or should he simply pay what our WR1 is asking for? In my personal opinion, McLaurin has earned every dollar he's asking for. He's been nothing but professional throughout his career, has produced consistently even with poor quarterback play, and has never been a distraction. Pay the man. Do you think we made a mistake letting Jamin Davis go too early? Or was it the right decision given what we had at the time? Honestly, I think we gave Davis every opportunity to succeed. Sometimes players just need a fresh start with different coaching. I'm happy for Davis that he's finding success, but I don't regret moving on. And what do you think about the handling of Hampton? Was it fair to cut him so quickly, or should he have had more developmental opportunities? This one is tough because Hampton showed flashes of potential in college, but at some point, you have to accept that certain players just aren't NFL material. Peters made the right call. These are the questions defining the future of our franchise. And I need to know what you think. Leave your comments below because I want to read each and every one of your opinions. This community is a family, and the organization's decisions affect us all equally. The next few weeks will be crucial in determining the direction of this franchise. McLaurin's situation needs to be resolved before cut-down day. We need to see continued development from our young players. And we need Peters to prove that his philosophy of building through the draft while being selective with veteran contracts can actually work. If you like this content and want to stay up to date with all the exclusive Commanders news, I need you to subscribe now. Hit the subscription button and activate notifications because every day we have information you won't find anywhere else. And remember, hail to the Redskins.